think we are recording. So today I've decided to do my video project on evolution of humans and how we have become the creatures we are and how and what has evolved over thousands of years. So important distinction I want to make right off the bat is the difference between bipedal and quadrupedal primates. So bipedalism involves primates who walk on 2 limbs, while quadrupedalism involves primates who walk on 4 limbs. A very easy way to remember this is bi is 2 and quad is 4. So that's a really easy way to keep them straight in your mind. If you're just learning this material, I find that very helpful. And one common theme I'm going to be talking about throughout this presentation is just how the chimpanzee is so related to us. And I'm going to be talking about the chimpanzee because they are the closest biological ancestor to us. Also, fun fact, humans are actually the only bipedal primates. And I've included some skeletons here. This is a human skeleton and this is a chimpanzee skeleton. And I just want you to look at the bone structure, look at how they're formed, and just kind of see like how their skeletons relate to each other. Why do you think certain things are the way they are? And I'll get more into it in the next slide. So, humans versus chimpanzees. A human pelvis is bowl-shaped, the ilium is laterally flared, and has a short ischium, and the femur is at a bicondylar angle. So everything, the entire way the bones are shaped, how big the bones are perfectly suited for bipedal walking. It means walking on 2 legs, if you remember. And the chimpanzee has a narrow and long pelvis, a long ilium, a long ischium, and the femur is oriented laterally. So everything on the chimp is perfectly suited for quadrupedal walking, which is walking on all 4s. Bicondylar is kind of complicated, so I'm going to get into it on the next slide, and I think you'll be able to see this one really well. So all I mean by bicondylar is it's at an angle. So if you notice the chimpanzee femur, it's straight up and down. But if you see the human femur, we're at an angle all of a sudden, and that's all that means, and it's just very helpful in terms of walking with 2 legs instead of 4. But why did we even become bipedal? Like what evolutionary environmental issues or what pushed us to walk on 2 legs? And there's a couple different theories for this. One is that it's just simply more energy efficient than walking on 4 legs. Another one's environmental factors. For example, thousands of years ago, we were hunter-gatherers. We're living in forests and in jungles, and sometimes it's beneficial to be up higher. So the fact that we could stand on 2 legs and see up above everybody else would be very beneficial for us in hunting and gathering and avoiding predators. And finally, the most obvious one probably would be we have 2 extra limbs now if we're only using 2 limbs to walk with. So these 2 extra limbs can be used for carrying food, it can be used for using tools, or it can even be used for gesticulating, just how I'm doing right now. And honestly, people underrate how helpful this is in communication, how often people use their hands to communicate. You know, a simple handshake is like a big communication thing. So that was more of the bone aspect of the side of how we've evolved bone-wise and how we've evolved into bipedal primates. But now I'm going to move into the brain because the brain is a whole different ballgame. This is honestly the more important aspect. So here we have a chimp brain and we have a human brain. I want you guys to see the difference. I'll give you a few seconds just to look at it and see what you notice. Okay, if you notice, the human brain is much, much bigger than the chimp brain. And this is going to be very important in our next slide. And I think our next slide will show you why this is the case. So we have 2 beautiful graphs from the Smithsonian Institute. And these numbers don't have units, but we can use them to quantify our data, and it'll make sense in that aspect when we compare the graphs. So right when the chimpanzee is born, this brain size is about 150. And right when a human baby is born, its brain size is about 300. So the human baby's brain is about double the size of the chimpanzee brain. The main difference is how the brain grows after birth. So the chimpanzee brain grows a little bit, it grows to 300, but then completely drops off and stays at 300. It doesn't grow much more after that. So the major advantage us humans have is that our brain has a lot of plasticity. And what plasticity means is that as we grow older, through our environment, through our experiences, our brain is able to change. It's able to make new neural connections, and it's able to grow and become bigger. And we can see this on the graph because it's the orange lines are for when the brain is growing rapidly, and the blue lines are for when the brain growth slows. And we can see that our brain doesn't stop growing like heavily until like 5 years of age, while the chimp brain stops growing heavily like 2 years. So we have a lot more time outside of the womb when our brain is actively growing and maturing. And we can see that we get up to a brain size of 1,200, while chimps max out at about 300. So our brain is approximately 4 times bigger than the chimps at this point, which just shows you our level of development and how much plasticity is an imperative part in our growth. Now, you may think a bigger brain is always better, but there's a lot of pros, but there are also some cons, and we're going to get into that on this slide. So some of the pros, let's get into the fun stuff. We can obviously store more information because we have more neural networks. We're able to process more because we have more neurons, and we can conceptualize difficult concepts due to the parts of our brain that have been evolved and expanded over time. Some of the cons, though, which may not be as obvious, is a bigger brain costs a lot more energy. So the brain actually uses about 20% of your body's total energy. It also makes childbirth a lot more painful because, as we see back on this slide, when we come out of the womb, our brain is 2 times bigger than the chimps. Now, that might not be a big deal if you're not thinking about it, but the skull has to come out of the vaginal canal. The vaginal canal is not big, and that is actually one of the limiting factors for our brain growth before we can get out of the womb, because we physically cannot give birth to a bigger skull. And that is why that a lot of other primates who have smaller brains don't have to deal with nearly as much pain when giving childbirth that humans do. And let's get into, I've been talking about a lot of how the brain is just growing, but let's talk about what in the brain is actually growing and maturing. So the first 2 things I want to talk about are Broca's area and Wernicke's area. Now, these 2 areas are key for linguistics and our language. So Broca's area deals with speech and talking, and Wernicke's area deals with comprehension and understanding. Now, these were imperative because our language skills are part of the reason that we are the way we are today. The next thing is cortical folding, which seems like a lot of big words, but it's simply brain just folding in upon itself to make more neural connections and to save space, because the skull, we only have a limited space. The brain can only grow so much inside of the skull. So by cortical folding, it's able to save space and make more neural connections. Next, we got the neocortex, which is a fancy term for the 4 lobes, which is the frontal, the parietal, the temporal, and the occipital. And each of these lobes do something different, and they've been expanded and evolved over time. And lastly, the cerebral cortex has also gotten very evolved, which deals with higher order thinking similar to the frontal lobe. All these areas have been evolved throughout time, and these are the main areas of the brain that have been very much evolved. So yeah, evolution is awesome. I really hope you enjoyed my presentation. My works cited is right here. If you guys have any questions, you can email me at dmp6073@psu.edu. But if not, I really hope you enjoyed. And yeah, this is my presentation.